We're going to go now to Lia Carvalho. She's from Portugal. She's a woman who's always stood up for equity, defending women's rights, and who considers that radical feminism really fights for women, working with facts and evidence. Lia is an archaeologist by profession and a social science enthusiast with labour and social anthropological experiences, mostly in Portugal and Brazil. And the title of Lia's talk today is Gender Identity in Portugal, Digital Guidelines. So thank you so much, Lia, for coming and speaking, and over to you.
Hi, sisters. Well, as an archaeologist, I was digging in some browsers, just searching for the word transgender, and I found some articles from some newspapers and associations, and I bring us the data that I found when I make these searches. So according to an article that I found quite complete from January of this year, there is no data on how many trans people there are in Portugal. It is known that 185 adults and between 10 and 15 children are being monitored at University's Hospital Center of Porto's University. According to the government's Institute of Registration, in 2020, the registry services received 233 requests to change the mention of sex or first name, with the number growing in 2021 to a total of 400 requests. In 2022, the trend continued up and the services registered 492 requests until November. It is the most significant jump since 2017, when the number of people who started their identity in the civil registry rose from 89 to 146, 64% more. A normal trend, simply says Sasha Montfort from Association Transmission, a trans and non-binary association. As indicated in a news item on the subject, another piece of news refers that alterations are mostly from female to male. It was from 2019 that the process streamlined. In addition to allowing the change for those aged between 16 and 18 through legal representatives, almost 1,016 in total completed the process. But there are few who managed to undergo the surgical procedures to change their identity in the National Health Service, currently in charge of the Hospital and University Center of Coimbra in the Genital, Urinary and Sexual Reconstruction Units that I'm going to refer as ERGUS. It's simpler. In 2020, 13 surgeries were performed. The main procedures were 2 vaginoplasties, 1 phalloplasty, 5 hysterectomies, and bilateral adnectomies. Sorry, but these are kind of difficult words. In 2021, 54 were performed, 15 vaginoplasties, 4 phalloplasties, and 10 hysterectomies and bilateral adnectomies, with or without vaginectomy. Vaginectomy. Jaime Moura, 19 years old, a psychology student from ex-ACO, that is an association for trans people, is another of the associations involved in the streets actions, points out that health is one of the areas where discrimination is felt the most. So he says, in Portugal, access to healthcare is limited. There are few professionals prepared to interact with trans people, and it's not just from a clinical point of view. And surgeries take years. The first consultation at Ergas has an average waiting time of 3 months, assures Susana Pinheiro from the association. However, demand has been growing, putting more pressure on waiting times. The time between the first consultation, which will always be sexology, and the first surgical intervention is very variable, depending on whether the transsexual person is undergoing startup process at Ergas, or if she is already referred from another sexology or endocrinology consultation just to perform surgeries. She explains this. Usually, the first surgery in male transgender people is a bilateral mastectomy, the removal of the breast. And in female transgender people, it is genital surgery. The trans community claims security, access to job, and decent housing. They also want the legislation to be changed for those who do not identify as female or male. Non-binary people are not recognized. We want this recognition. Portugal, which has been innovative, namely in the gender self-determination law, and now could make this legislative change similar to what already happens in other countries. Defends Joe Rodrigues, non-binary transsexual, which should make it unnecessary for them to say whether they are female or male. Puts M or F in the citizen card, which was not mentioned in the identity card. Society, in a way, is creating an inclusive environment. We have more people who are against it, but also more who are respectful of individual rights. On the other hand, this increase is a reflection of the 2018 law. 4 years later, it's normal that the numbers are increasing, since until then, it was a much more bureaucratic and evasive process. Explains João Rodrigues, 26 years old, a doctor in the first year of hospitalization and president of the Anemone Association, another association that was created specifically for the promotion of health in the LGBTI+ community. With regard to minors, according to news on August 8th of Jornal de Notícias, around 154 minors have changed in the last 5 years their name and gender on their identification documents. In 2018, there were only 11. In 2019 and 2020, 16 minors requested the change, while in 2021, there were 30 requests. Last year, 45 young people aged 16 and 17 changed their name and gender of their identification documents. The overwhelming majority of requests registered since 2018 are from young people who have passed to the male sex. In Portugal, the law of self-determination allows adolescents to choose their sex from the age of 16. A case presented in the article summarized the child with interests considered of the opposite gender, in a family context, self-identified as modern and disconstructed in the way of thinking and living. It exposes the sexual orientation of the mother, that is a bisexual person, as well as her current homosexual relationship, and makes reference to the non-binary uncle of the child. Another case is from a 25-year-old barber and influencer who lived 18 years in a body that did not belong to him. and refers to the division of trans people into those who had undergone genital surgeries as transsexuals and as a transgender those who did not, as reductive and invasive, and that the second term, the transgender term, is a more inclusive and correct term. Data collected by Statista between April and May of 2021 through a survey involving around 1,900 people between the ages of 16 and 74 show that Germany and Sweden are the countries where most people identify as transgender, with a gender fluidity or non-binary gender, 3% of the population in each of the countries. Then India, Hungary, Argentina, Brazil, Russia, Canada, Australia, Spain, United Kingdom, and Chile with 2%, and South Korea, Italy, Peru, Malaysia, Turkey, Japan, Netherlands, Mexico, China, France, Poland, South Africa, USA, and Belgium with 100%. The World Association for Transgender Health is peremptory in reinforcing the need to reduce the stigma associated with gender nonconformity, not referring to it as a disease or a pathology. Regarding the possibility of changing sex before coming of age, during childhood and the pre-pubertal phase, according to Elsa Rocha Fernandes, a psychiatrist and guest lecturer at the Faculty of Medicine of Lisbon, the existing literature points out several pros and cons in relation to both social transition or hormonal at this stage. Among the factors in favor of social transition in prepubertal children and young people, the improvement of mental health in a population that has high rates of suicidal ideation is mentioned. It also refers to the fact that not accommodating the social transition can be considered a violation of children's autonomy, a psychological abuse, and that is an abuse of human rights, she explained. With regard to hormonal transition, taking pubertal blockers, such as testosterone and estrogens, during puberty can, in the case of those born male, decrease the growth of facial and body hair, prevent the development of a deeper voice, and limit the growth of genitalia. And in the case of people who were female at birth, the treatment limits breast development and stops menstruation. With puberty being especially uncomfortable and stressful, for those with gender dysphoria, the result of blocking the development of secondary sexual characteristics according to the sex present at birth can improve mental health by decreasing anxiety and depression, improving social relationships and with other adolescents, which can eliminate the need for future surgical interventions and reduce suicidal or self-injurious thoughts, she warned. The global issue, and one of concern currently found in the literature in relation to the early transition in childhood and pre-puberty, says the doctor, goes through the concern with, among others, the side effects associated with the therapy used, such as short-term headache or weight gain, and in the long term, for example, decreased growth and decreased bone density and fertility in adulthood. While social transition and hormone suppression treatment at puberty may be reversible, other changes are semi-permanent or permanent, such as gender-affirming hormone treatment or surgical interventions, a factor that weighs especially heavily in decisions made. I wanted to show that if you make any kind of search, you are going to have this pro-trans speech.
Yeah.
So, and the sexual preferences, orientations, kinds of styles of living of the people are exposed to justify this speech in the articles, in the news. Yes, I'm against what I'm reading, of course, or I wouldn't be here. But I was really wanted to show you that it's what we find in the media. It's the speech that it is been given to the Portuguese people also, right? And it has been difficult to find to fight against it because anyone wants to be inclusive and no one wants to be called a prejudiced person or
yeah.
well,
So the information that you've been giving us, is that the main information available in Portugal?
it is the most easiest to find. It's the information that you get by some articles of newspapers and associations that just pops when in the browsers when you make some search of the theme of the trans theme. So yes, it is a speech that it's hard to read and to listen, but it has been what we are being exposed to here in Portugal also. And yes, and we like to be, as was referred here, we like to be a country that is joining the news, the political rights and the European conventions, and in the law itself, it says there we are making this law because it is the law that it is being applied in the other European countries.
So they're very much saying we're trying to keep in line with European. Yeah. And the numbers, you as an archaeologist, you said that you're using a sort of data mining, you're using the same digging that you do in archaeology. It's surprising to me that you've managed to find the numbers of people who have had surgeries and
kind of
change.
surgery.
Yeah, yes. Is that freely available in Portugal?
Well, I found it in this article and I was surprised too, in that I'm going to be really honest, I was surprised also with the fact that in this article, they talk a little bit of people who wants to reverse the trans process.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to find it here and I can focus on that part there. It is more what we want to know actually, because for me as a radical feminist, there are some situations, some social situations that of course I want to listen the people that are in there, but I want to listen more the people who got out there. And I'm talking about themes like abusive relationships, prostitution, transgender people who found out that after all they are not transgender. So because we know that human brains have too many strategies to make us feel good where we are, even if we aren't in the right place.
Yeah. And I have another question. Is there much of a movement in Portugal of people fighting back against transgender ideology?
Not really. We have the WDI volunteer group here in Portugal. We have some media on social media. We have some groups that are critical to gender ideology, but in general, there are closed groups. People can't give their real opinion in the social media, because we have the Facebook and Instagram blockers, instance with hates of speech, hates of speech, and etc. So there are some closed groups, but I think that we can't fight in the same proportion.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
all the media are having a pro speech, and all the parties are or trying to get neutral or giving the support, because yes, the world is all over the world. This is the main speech to LGBT.
Yeah, mainly going that way. That's a real shame.
I have a part of a text with the increased incidence per year and per person, and then it said that in Portugal the theme is beginning to be studied, and in a dissertation called Poverty Suppression in Trans Children and Adolescents, a dissertation from the application to the master's degree in medicine, submitted in University of Porto by Eduardo Rosas, we can read one of the main arguments for limiting the access of transgender children, adolescents, and adults to gender-affirming therapies, whether pharmacological or surgical, is based on the existence of regret. It therefore becomes important to explore possible correlations between gender-affirming therapies, including pubertal suppression, and the development of feeling of regret. The reasons behind this choice to reverse the transitional process were studied through a survey carried out in 2021 and filled out by 100 individuals who decide to reverse their transition. Possible reasons for reversing the transitional process include exposure to discrimination, 23%, respondents feeling more comfortable identifying themselves according to their gender assigned at birth, 60%, fears related to possible medical complications associated with the transition process, 49%, and individuals conclude that the cause of their gender dissociation was related to reasons other than gender incongruity, namely trauma, abuse, or a mental illness, 38%. It is highlighted, and the majority of the study population, 55%, said they felt they did not receive an adequate assessment from their doctor before starting the transition process. So, about this, I have knowledge of one case of a girl that claims she is 13 years old, and 12 to 13 years old, and she claims that she wants to be a boy. And the doctor, we have the called family doctors here in Portugal. They are the general doctor of her mother and hers, is kind of taking the association's guidelines. Of course, she is said to her that they are not so sure of what are they doing, but is going to study the most he can and help her the most he can, and then when she gets 16 with her mom's authorization, she can start the hormonal process. So there are doctors taking these guidelines, pro-trans guidelines. They are everywhere, okay? They can't, by law, they can't do things before the 16 years old of the adolescent, but we know that there are ones that wants to be inclusive and wants to help these children. I believe that the speech of the suicidal thoughts, it's
The
one of
same
the
thing,
most,
yeah.